Alright, we got three more movies from this year, kind of in the action territory in varying degrees and in various styles. Um, I guess we're going to start with Extraction 2, which is taking us to Netflix, which is basically the land of if you're even just a step above incompetent, you could probably be accused of being amazing and great because the bar is just that low. As far as Netflix goes, I guess that's the only way I can explain the overwhelming praise for the first Extraction, which to me was just another action movie, and with, fake long takes and all that stuff, and still shaky camera work and all that, but a lot of people thought it was above that, so I don't know. So I didn't really have any expectations for this one at all. Like, I wasn't going in saying, like, oh, this is gonna suck. I just kind of had no expectations at all, even though this one was getting praised just as much, if not more. So, I don't really have much of a memory of the first movie, but I was told going in that it wasn't really necessary. So I was able to just kind of piece together, like, with characters like Nick and her brother and stuff like that. I was like, they were probably in the first movie, right? I'm assuming so because of everybody's closeness and connection and all that. But you can kind of pick that up as you go if you don't remember the first movie, so there's that. Um, and I was also kind of afraid going into this because we've talked before about, especially when Red Notice was out, this approach that Netflix has to action movies, especially, where somebody allegedly said, somebody from Netflix allegedly said that they do actually have the approach where they will make movies around people who look at their phones, where they'll make movies that are just sudden bursts of action so that people have just enough time to look up and then they'll look back to their phone or whatever else they're doing. And that's how Netflix tends to make action movies. So, as disheartening as that is, and the mindset I went into with this one, I was kind of surprised that this one did seem to have a bit more of a. I mean, you can get that vibe of its very choreographed bursts of action as far as the structure goes, as far as like keeping somebody's attention just long enough that they'll keep watching. But when it started, I was surprised by how calm it was. Like, it doesn't start right away just throwing a lot of action and stuff at you, where we do have Chris Hemsworth recovering from the first movie and going through this whole kind of quiet living as he recovers and all that. And then Idris Elba comes in, who is inexplicably cast. This really could have been anybody. You can tell they're kind of setting up the franchise thing, so I'm assuming he's supposed to become more crucial or whatever, but I don't know. Obviously Hemsworth's going to get his Rocky 4 montage, and then he's going to get back in this. But I was really surprised how much the movie kind of took its time getting to what was going to set off the action and all that stuff. At first I was feeling a little cynical, where I was like, well, whatever they're setting up here isn't even going to matter, so why are we even doing this? But yeah, it was interesting that these scenes are actually better in retrospect, now having seen the full movie, because the movie actually is surprising about how, when it takes breaks between action, it doesn't necessarily always feel like just a break till the next action scene like movies like this tend to do, and the way Netflix is set up tends to do with action movies. They actually focused quite a bit on character in this one. If they did in the first movie, once again, I really don't remember, but I don't really think they did. I think it was kind of much more action-faced, and this one takes a surprising amount of time towards its characters, which is nice. But, yeah, so the first action scene gets here, and this is, even though I feel like more good things to say about this movie than I thought I would. There is still something that's really, really annoying, and I want to get this out of the way first before we talk about where the movie actually kind of starts to work. And what's interesting is that this part that I want to get past to talk about the parts of the movie that work is probably what a lot of people are going to consider to be the best thing about the movie, which is this fake long take. Um, where obviously there I feel like I've been saying this endlessly, at least since Atomic Blonde. How tired this whole thing is of convincing people that one scene is supposed to look like it's one long thing. And it's great in movies when they do it for like, 4 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever. But now they're just really trying to build up that number as much as they possibly can, to the point that they don't even care that you know anymore that it's a fake long take, because it's so glaringly obvious that it is. And at that point you have to wonder what's really the point, because the great thing about doing those takes that are like, 4 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever, that are real, that are actually real unbroken takes, is that it kind of puts you like right in that perspective, and you're seeing the action in real time, and you're seeing it in real time. Especially when there's when time is of the essence in a scenario like this, it's especially really effective. So here, to do this thing where the scenes go on and on and on, and you can tell there are scenes that were shot, at different times. Like, we'll do this sequence, then we'll do this sequence, then this sequence, and there's like multiple sequences, and then they string it together to make it look like it's one. Um, like I said, as far as getting you into the action, making you feel like it's in real time, I understand the point of it, but like I said, when the audience is now in on the fact that it's clearly stitched together other takes, I feel like there's a sloppiness to that really does the exact opposite of what it's trying to accomplish. Where, like, all you're focusing on is, oh, this is where this scene was stitched with this scene and that scene and all that. It does not have that single flow feel to it at all. And they were really trying to build it up too in the marketing, where it was like, oh, the one take sequence was shot over like 2 months or something, or it took multiple months to shoot the, in quotes, long take. And it's like, okay, so we know that these are all scenes stitched together. So what you're saying is it took months to do this sequence that you stitched to this sequence that you stitched to this sequence. So what you're saying is you were making a movie the normal way. You're making a normal movie. It's just, instead of there being, cuts from one scene to the other or whatever, they're still cut. They're just made to blend. But still, you just made a movie the normal way. You made a movie like anybody else would. You made scenes, and then you cut them together at the end of the day. That's all it is. So, that's... I don't... And there's even... And it gets to the point also where there's like this moment where Hemsworth gets, like, knocked out for a second, and the camera, like, kind of follows him. And it's like, you can see where they're trying to throw in different shooting techniques while they're still in this one take, in quotes. But it's like all that, it's just drawing so much attention to itself by saying, hey, look what we're doing now in this one take. Look how many different things we're doing, but we're all putting it in this, it's all in this one thing. Isn't that crazy? No, there's nothing about this sequence that would or would not have been improved by the fact that you could have just made one long take scene that's an actual long take, and then, yeah, okay, so there's a cut, and then you go to a next scene, but then the next scene is also its own one long take, and so on. You would have accomplished the exact same... Actually, it probably would have improved it, because you're not drawing so much fucking attention to the fact that you're doing one take. And the flow would have been... The flow probably would have been even better, because it actually does get to a point to where, by the time they're like, on the train, it's just like... It's not like, oh man, how long has this been going? It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, how long has this been going? Like, how long are they going to try to keep this shit up? Like, everything they try to accomplish with this just has the opposite effect. And like, you can see where all the fakery is, too. That's the part that just completely defeats the purpose. So, I don't know. And they're so CGI heavy and all that stuff also. Just nothing about this feels like you're in one continuous moment at all. And like I said, the fact that audiences are so aware of that now makes it even more... What's the point? Like I said, you can just do multiple long takes that are clearly different shots. It'll still feel like the same sequence. You'll still have the audience feel like they're in the moment, as long as you're not cutting a lot. It's like they overcorrected the heavily edited action scene that always gets criticized for good reason. Like, the Taken 3 bullshit, or even... These movies are typically praised for it, but Bourne movies feel very over-edited. And it's like an overcorrection of that, where it's like, okay, we're just gonna try to take all the cuts out. But it's like, no, you can do a long sequence and break it up, and you would still get that same feeling honestly, with less of a chance of taking the audience, you know, making them too aware of what's going on, technically, rather than just watching the scene itself and how it plays out. So, and everybody that's already aware of this, the people that are going to praise this and say, oh man, wasn't that sequence so amazing? These are probably people that know that it was stitched together. So whenever those people are watching this scene and for some reason praising it, in their minds they're saying like, oh, here's where the cuts are, and here's like, you shouldn't be saying here's where the cuts are. You should just feel like it's one big thing, but it just doesn't. It's too fucking fake to feel like it's one big thing, and everybody knows it. So that's the worst sequence in the movie to me. That entire, what was it, like 20 minutes or something? Like I said, the whole point is to just have that number they can put in the IMDb trivia and headlines. When it's not that number at all. There's nothing about that number, whatever it is, that's real. So I don't know. I really hate that. So, interestingly, you'll notice when I say, but it picks up after that, I like the fact that the movie does not try that again. Like, it does keep it to one portion of the movie. Like I said, you can't even call it a sequence. It's one entire portion of the movie, which I think is another thing they're trying to get praise for, but no, it doesn't work, to me anyway. So yeah, when the rest of it is shot in a way that it's not trying to do some sort of gimmick, but it's also not overly edited, and it's not constantly in close up. That's the goal we're trying to reach in the first place. Like I said, without the overcorrection of trying to very painfully, obviously eliminate the edits. So yeah, and we actually get to a moment where there's a scene where the characters are all like hanging off of something, and you actually surprisingly get a sense that the characters are in danger. Like, you actually get a sense that a major character could die in this scene. So, I guess, surprisingly enough. And it works. And I think another reason that works is, like I was saying, this movie's surprisingly good about setting up the characters, and this family in particular. There's especially a kid in this, the son, that I feel like in another movie with more poor handling would have been a really annoying character. You know those kids that are dropped into action movies just to be annoying and just to cause shit that the hero has to fix. That shit gets really annoying, and that's what this kid could have been. But the thing is we get to know this kid, and we know this kid's relationship with his uncle, who's the villain, and his relationship with his dad, who was killed in this sort of opening scene, and that affects this character through the rest of the movie, and his relationship with Hemsworth even. So, seeing how conflicted this kid is, and how bound to his family he is in multiple ways, because his family's going in so many different directions, and he's trying to bind himself to all of them, but that's conflicting to this child. So, when it gets to the point to where he makes a really stupid decision that gets everybody in danger and everybody potential to be killed, it makes sense why he made that decision. And not only does it make sense that he made that decision, but every character shames him for it as the movie goes on. So it's not like something he got off scot-free of doing, like, oh no, I'm just a stupid kid. Like, every character at some point confronts this kid and says, what the fuck did you do? And I love that. I love the fact that the kid has to be confronted with, he did a really stupid fucking thing. But, like I said, at the same time, we can understand why he made that decision. And it's like, that's really refreshing. And it's like, if you're going to throw kids into action movies like this and put the heroes in danger inadvertently, this would be the way to do it. And so, which means the rest of the action kind of comes organically. So, yeah, it feels like it works, honestly. The second half of this movie is perfectly fine. And that first half just, I don't know. And bringing in Hemsworth's backstory as he relates to this kid is another point where I would normally say, oh, here comes the tragic backstory. But yeah, the way it ties in actually works, and it gives Hemsworth an actually tragic backstory. It's not just like, oh, the script needed me to be sad and have this inner vulnerability to me. No, it's actually a genuinely tragic story. So, yeah, it works out. We do eventually get to a point where they go to a safe house, and tell me any action movie you've seen where there's a break in the action where they go to a safe house, and tell me that wasn't the most fucking boring scene in the movie, and the scene that really could have been cut down or taken out entirely. Tell me anybody that likes the safe house scene of an action movie, and I will show you a potentially insane person. But and then yeah, and we're just waiting for the action to find the safe house and then go from there, and then we'll get our climax. So it all still feels very by the numbers and obvious. Like I said, it was the attention to the characters and how that actually propelled us into the action and made the action like it gave the action a point. And was actually starting to work for me. So, like I said, the first half of this movie I could not give less of a shit about. But the second half of this movie really, really picked up, and I can see where people actually like, genuinely like this one. The way people like the first movie, like I said, and I don't want to, tell people what to like and not like, or think that I can do that. But like I said, just to me, from my perspective, the praise for the first movie just felt like Netflix setting a really low bar. Um, so this one, like I said, the gimmicks are still in here, but the second half worked for me enough that I like this one a lot more than I liked the first movie. So that's how I feel about that. So let's go on to Sisu, this movie that seemed to kind of sneak up on everybody, I think, with its very interesting marketing, which I'll get into in a minute, but to talk about just kind of the opening scenes here, because I didn't really know what it was. I just knew that the marketing focused on the dog, and that's basically what it was. So it was basically building itself up as a really, gory, bloody, R-rated war movie that has a cute dog in it, and like that's what the marketing was. So starting off, the guy that owns the dog, I guess they seem to kind of just walk around together, but I'm assuming this is a dog slash owner situation. Um, there's almost no dialogue for a long time. It's almost like I don't want to quite compare it to like There'll Be Blood's opening, but yeah, it's very little dialogue and just watching this prospector do his thing where he's digging for gold, and we get these really large scale shots, and this one particular shot where he's sitting around a campfire and planes are flying over is phenomenal. It's something you would imagine out of like a Spielberg war movie or something. And there's like this shot where when he first uncovers the gold and you see it like reflecting off of his face, and this actor is amazing by the way, just with like his expressions and reaction shots and all that. And that's the setup, is just this guy, and then he's on his journey, and then he comes across Nazis, and then naturally that's where we're gonna take off, and it turns into the whole, and you could say it feels knockoff, like where it's like, because he's got the cute dog, and then we get the backstory where it's like, oh, he's killed 7 of their men, and that was them being lucky, and it's like, this guy's actually a dark killing machine who was just trying to find a normal, quiet life. And it's like, yeah, obviously it's the John Wick thing. Like, really, really, like, it'd be one thing if it was the guy with the dark backstory who's just trying to settle down now, but throwing in the cute dog, too, it's like, it's clearly some kind of Wick feel, but the movie still feels like the movie's still unique enough that there are these things, because obviously, Inglourious Basterds is probably going to get brought up a lot because of the World War II setting and the killing Nazis graphically and the chapter headings and stuff like that. You can see other movies in this, and normally that'd be annoying, because it'd be like, oh, it's just a Frankenstein monster of a movie of just other movies, and that's all you're doing is identifying other movies. But no, like, I found that stuff very fleeting to me, because the movie is such a unique own thing, because it was like, oh yeah, that is the John Wick thing, but for some reason I'm not that annoyed, because whatever we're about to do with this is going to be totally different than John Wick. And the same thing with the Bastard stuff, where it's like, yeah, they're killing Nazis graphically and there's chapters, but at the end of the day, that's not that specific of a comparison when you look at what the movie is, and how it's doing its own thing. So, and I especially love the way they utilized stuff like the minefield. where the minefield is already this really great setting and this big suspenseful scene, like right here. It feels like right here at the start is the minefield scene actually. And the way like the scenes flow into each other, where it's like one, deadly setting to another as it goes on. But it's like, but it also highlights the incompetence of the Nazis. Where like when we have this minefield setting, it's like, yes, this is a movie about a guy, and maybe more than just him graphically killing Nazis, but sometimes the Nazis is like incompetence is what gets them killed over anything else. And so, and as brutally, like their incompetence does them in as brutally as this guy does or anything else does. So I love that. And what I also actually love about this, that I think separates it from especially something like John Wick, is this movie is so incredibly uncomplicated. It's like when I told you, it's like, oh, a guy finds gold. He has a a dark backstory. He's a killing machine, but he just wants to settle down. He finds gold, and he's gonna take his gold, and then he comes across Nazis, and he has to go through them. That's what the movie is, and nothing else. It's like, because when you watch stuff like John Wick, it's like that's gotten you so used to like, oh, everything has to be world building, everything has to be subplots, everything has to be all these side characters, everything has to be backstory, and there's very limited backstory. There's like one scene where they're like, oh yeah, this guy's a killing machine. That's about it. And nothing else. No real subplots. As far as side characters, we do have this group of women that's being held prisoner by the Nazis. But the thing is that at the end of the day, obviously they have a whole other arc going on, but at the end of the day, the end goal of this movie is kill the Nazis. And the women and this guy have the same goal. So the way that sort of comes together, when we're with the women, it never feels like we're branching off or straying off into something else. It all feels like we're in this very uncomplicated story of this is the goal and that's it. And that's all it needs to be. The movie's only an hour and a half. That's it. Take out the credits, it's less than an hour and a half. So that's the kind of movie that I really love. Where it's like, in certain cases, I'm fine with world building. I'm fine with subplots. But like, there's just so much of that. I feel like we're really straying away from these very uncomplicated movies. And here's the goal and that's what it needs to be. And it's not trying to like franchise itself or anything like that. So I find that very satisfying in general. And and to talk about the marketing, what I also think is interesting, it was a very interesting choice to market this movie around the dog, but I think it worked. Because I think the great thing, because the dog, like, hardly plays a part in this at all. But the thing about that is you would normally say, oh my, that's such sleazy marketing to say, oh, this is what the movie is, but then you go and it's just not that. Like, the dog is barely in this movie and has hardly anything to do with what's going on. You're just hoping he doesn't die, that's the only thing, which I think is also kind of what the marketing was around. But the reason that I think that works is that instead of audiences saying, like, oh, I came for this thing, but it's something else entirely, I feel bamboozled, it feels much more of that case of when you go to something for a reason and then the whole thing of I went for this thing but I stayed for this thing, and it's like I imagine people coming to, because the movie is so satisfying, and I feel like probably universally satisfying, is people would come to this movie saying they came to see the cute dog, they stayed for the movie, like they stayed for what it actually is. So it doesn't leave you with that bamboozled feeling when it's not like, a dog movie. So I'm perfectly fine with that also. And I also like that it does have the feel of like an exploitation movie, but it doesn't feel cheap. Like I said, it feels like we get these really large scale shots, like I said, that almost could have been in a Spielberg movie. But at the same time, it still absolutely has the sort of exploitation feel, and we've seen this fail before. Another director that's often praised that I do not like is S. Craig Zahler, and I especially went after Brawl in Cell Block 99, because Brawl in Cell Block 99's whole thing was, hey, we're like an exploitation movie. And it really, apart from the gore, it felt like anything but. It felt like such a cop-out to say, oh, we're trying to do an exploitation movie. It felt like that movie was trying to use that as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Whereas this actually genuinely feels that way because I can imagine a movie like Brilliant Solomon 99 without the over the top gore. Like obviously that was just whatever the hell that was. This is a movie where if it I can't imagine this movie without the over the top gore because it's such an integral part of this movie's personality. Like that's the whole movie's personality, so I can't even imagine that without it. That's where I feel like you could get away with saying, it's supposed to be like an exploitation movie. But as far as like saying get away with it, no, I feel like it's just that's just inherently what this movie is. Like it almost doesn't even feel like it's trying to be or trying to emulate something. This is just what this movie is. This movie is just laying itself bare for its audience and saying this is what's up. We're killing Nazis, and it's really graphic and over the top, and occasionally a cute dog will run through the frame, and we're all satisfied at the end. So, yeah, that's fantastic. So, I also I also love when you go back. I actually ended up watching this twice. I got it out of Redbox because I'm ancient, and I let it play, and then I just kind of started and kind of let it play again. And there's this moment at the beginning that I love where the guy walks by the Nazis the first time, and he's just gonna walk by, and one guy pulls out a rifle and almost shoots him, and like our head villain here says, don't, he'll die out there," and then that's it. And I love the fact that this whole movie could not have happened if the main villain had not just said, don't worry about it. And then everything that happens in this movie happens to them. And I love that in retrospect as well. So, yeah, this is really satisfying. Like I said, you don't need to be overcomplicated. You don't need to do world building all the time. You don't need subplots galore. You can just be really simple and really uncomplicated and be extremely satisfying at the end. So that obviously proves this. So let's end on Plane. This goes way back. Did this come out in like January or at the latest February? This was like at the beginning of the year, and I just kind of forgot about it. But because these Gerard Butler's doing so many movies right now, and they're all blending together for me, and I haven't seen most of the recent ones. So there's, I think another one like just came out on Blu-ray or something. But this one, Plane, does put him in that typical Gerard Butler scenario of like the regular guy who's kind of put in an action scenario. I mean, he's a pilot, but it still has that sort of regular guy feel because we open and he's talking to his daughter and all that, and we get that relationship. But yeah, so he's getting ready to take off into this storm, and a criminal is brought on board, which he did not know was going to happen. And the first thought is this going to be like a turbulence kind of thing? Because I didn't really know where this movie was going. I think I knew this initial setup as there was a prisoner on the plane and then shit went down, but I wasn't sure what exactly was going on. But your first thought when you think of that is, it's going to be like a turbulence scenario where the criminal gets free and then everybody on the flight's in danger or something. Well, it's a very limited flight. There's only like 6 or 8 people on it or something. But yeah, they're going through this intense weather because the higher ups are jackasses, and which is it's uncomfortable how believable the setup to this movie is, by the way. Because we also have the moment where we get Gerard Butler's backstory about why he doesn't have like his position isn't as high as it used to be. Because he's under punishment, and the punishment was that he got into it with a drunk, belligerent passenger. And I swear, I feel like I see a new video every single day of drunk, belligerent passengers on planes causing shit. So it's like, everything about the setup of this movie is like, I buy this completely. I don't care how over the top this movie is about to get, but the setup is completely believable. They have to go through a storm and they crash because of the jackass higher-ups trying to save money, and drunk, belligerent passengers getting people in trouble that are doing the right thing. So it's it all makes sense. And yeah, when we get this first sequence where they have to go through... first off, I like the takeoff sequence where we're kind of seeing... It's not quite a first-person perspective, but we're like right behind them and looking out through the windshield, and it's like this great takeoff sequence, and then the sequence where they go through the weather, they go through the storm, and it's like genuinely intense. It's really well done. And honestly, for a movie like this, I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting this movie to maybe come off a little cheap. But no, this is like really well done. I also kind of love it when movies validate my insistence to never get on planes. So that helps too. So I was really sort of vibing with this movie for a while, and then obviously they crash in what may or may not be the Philippines. Nobody really seems sure where they are. And then they're going to come across a bigger danger and unable to get out of it. So, with how good this plane sequence was, and the fact that the movie's called Plane, and then putting us in this very obvious place of, oh, now we're crashed in a different country and there's criminals here, and we're going to have to deal with them, and maybe there'll be a hostage scenario, something like that. For a while, I was thinking, like, is this going to... I'm assuming this peaked. Like, I'm assuming this peaked in its first 20 minutes. And the whole plane sequence that the movie's potentially named after is going to be what the high point is. And I would say... I mean, I would say the best part of the movie is probably the first 20 minutes, because it's a real... It's not just because... It's not, you know, that the movie's bad or that the movie's mediocre, even. Just that first 20 minutes is really, really good. But then, yeah, we do get to this scenario, and I was starting to wonder if it was mistitled, or if it was misleadingly titled Plane, but the plane does kind of have... It kind of becomes a target in a way in the middle, and then we're bookended with plane sequences. So it doesn't... At the end of the day, it doesn't feel like it's false advertising or anything. So both movies got around... This and Sisu both got around potential misleading marketing that actually still ends up working in the movie's favor. But yeah, I think something that holds the movie down a little bit is the fact that not only does it get... We're kind of in a more generic plot here once they crash, but the fact that we're stuck with these passengers, but there's no standout characters. Like, we have, like, you know, the guy that's kind of the rich asshole, and we have, like, the couple, but none of them stand... We don't really spend time with any of them. We're mainly focusing on Butler, and I think Mike Coulter is the actor's name that plays the criminal. And so they team up, and it's this whole thing. And, yeah, so you don't really care about the characters, but I did find it interesting that the danger scenes are well done enough that even though we don't really know the characters or give a shit about them, it's still pretty jarring and intense when occasionally one or two of them will be killed. Is very, like... I think it could be the which characters as far as, like, where they stand as far as their type. Which, like I said, doesn't sound like praise, but still, it's like... I guess you could say it's a couple of characters you're not expecting would be the ones that would die, and die so violently. But it really does set the danger in motion, and really, like I said, it puts you in this really intense place when they're killed, even though you don't really give a shit about the characters otherwise, but it still puts you in this real sort of feeling danger. And another thing that I thought worked was... Once it occurred to me that they were gonna, like, crash, it was like, okay, so I'm assuming he and the prisoner are gonna team up. Especially after the cop that was escorting him died in the crash. It was like, okay, so if they're gonna team up, what they're probably gonna do is, this guy's actually probably a good guy, and he's probably not guilty of the murder he's supposedly committed. And I like the fact that we learn very early, like, shortly after the crash, that they're not gonna go that route. He really did that. He did that. I mean, there's, like, a backstory to where it's like, yeah, I did it, but it was this, and all that. But it's like, still, he did it. And it's like, I was really expecting him to sort of backpedal on that, and it's like, no, man, I'm innocent. I didn't actually do it. I was framed and all that. But no, it's Butler working with this guy that killed somebody, and that's what the movie is. And that's... I'm good that they didn't back down on that. So there's that. I also... Another thing that I normally wouldn't like in a movie that this one does is we're cutting back and forth between them and, like, this jungle and Tony Goldwyn back at, like, headquarters, looking for them. And what would typically annoy me about that is it would cut off the tension, where it's like, if you're gonna crash in these people and make them feel trapped, make the audience feel trapped and never leave that place. Like, cutting back and forth will take us out of it. But I guess because the movie is so generic and we don't feel like we're missing anything when we cut to something else, I didn't mind that, because I also loved seeing Tony Goldwyn come in and just completely... the guy that said, oh, just fly through the weather, we'll be fine, gets his ass chewed. So obviously that's a scene we want to see, so that's satisfying also. And it's just always nice to see Tony Goldwyn, so I didn't mind this cutting back and forth like I would in another movie. like I said, if the movie over here in the jungle was more intense and more engaging, and the characters were more engaging, I do think it would be like taking us out of the moment to keep cutting back. But here, I didn't really mind it, and so, and the two of them together are fine. Like it sounds like a dig at the rest of the movie to say like I didn't mind we were cutting away from it, but it's fine. I do just wish the movie was more engaging overall, obviously, but it's fine, and it's leading us to this very over the top climatic shootout. The whole climax is really fun and over the top in a way. So, and then like I said, we get one more big plane sequence, which is good. So, yeah, it's fine. It's obviously it's not greatness. It's not really trying to get above being a typical movie like this. It's just fine at being at this sort of middle line of this is just what it is, and it's not in the way Sisu was, where it's like this is what we are, but we're doing it in a big, unique way. This is just like you've probably seen this before, and we're just gonna do that thing, but hopefully it's good enough, and yeah, like I said, it's engaging enough, and like I said, and not completely, but enough to where it's fine. Like I had no trouble getting to the end of it, so there's that. And like I said, some of those kill scenes really are genuinely jarring and intense, so that was kind of surprising. But it's still just a very average movie, but sometimes we're fine with that, and especially if Gerard Butler's at the head of them. Gerard Butler's done a lot of very average movies that are somehow still fine despite that, so it's probably a Butler thing. So we'll give him a lot of the credit for this as well. So I guess that's where we are with this. I don't really know what the next video is. There was something I was going to do, but I don't know if I want to say that for the October stuff. I'm still working that out, but we'll figure it out. So we've still got, like movie clubs and stuff like that coming, and Q&As and all that stuff, and whatever Ashley and Owen are doing, so there's going to be something. So until whatever that next thing is, I think that's it.